Hello, welcome to the Eclectic Reader. Listen to great books and stories while you use your eyes and hands for other things. Now here's your host, Madison Mason.
Hi there, it's Madison Mason. Welcome back to Chapter 48 of The Gray Quarry Boys. The Gray Quarry Boys, Chapter 48, Alone. Slick was so intent on getting the truck out of the gravel and back onto the road, he didn't know Johnny wasn't in the truck for 150 yards. "Did you get Johnny? Oh, shit, man!" And it took him another 100 to screech to a stop and turn around. He drove back slow on the side of the road, head out of the window, calling. No answer came. He couldn't see Johnny anywhere. He stopped and got out. "Johnny! Hey, yo! Where are you, man?" Slick was scared. The night was tremulous. All he could hear was his rumbling engine and the crickets calling each other for miles. He half expected Johnny to jump out of the dark and grab him. He almost hoped it would happen, but deep inside, he knew something much more sinister would take place. He was already planning to hide Johnny's body if he had to, and wipe away all the fingerprints from his truck. "Johnny! Answer me, boy! Where are you, fucker?" Slick lit a match and walked along the deserted road. The church was leaning in the direction they had been traveling. The windows were wiped off the wall where Johnny had scored a direct hit. Part of the church was smashed and torn away, revealing a solid gray concrete block inside. The smear of wood across the cold stone gave proof of the power of the Louisville slugger, which lay in pieces around the leaning pole. "Ow! Shit! God damn it!" Slick dropped the burnt match and sucked his fingers. He lit another and walked along the road until he saw something in the ditch. He ran back to the truck and yanked it into gear, pulling up to the edge of the ditch. The lights pierced the night at an eerie angle, and Slick jumped out of the cab, stumbling down into the ditch. Johnny's form lay crumpled as if an angry Goliath had finally had enough of this cocky little David and slammed him face down in the dirt, his arms and legs at weird angles to his torso. His right arm looked snapped in two. Slick was so scared he didn't know what to do. He began to curse to himself. He muttered like an idiot from another country. Half words ran out of him as insane gibberish. He rolled Johnny over. The whole right side of his face was a mass of blood. He was cold, but Slick could feel a pulse in his neck and see that the blood was still pumping from the hole in the side of his head. Shit, shit, shit was the sum total of Slick's ability to express himself as he tried to figure out what to do. He grabbed Johnny under the arms and, slipping and straining and saying shit over and over again, managed to pull his partner up the side of the storm ditch and onto the road. Johnny had never been anything but bones and stringy muscle, so he wasn't much to drag. Slim managed to get him to the truck. He hauled him up into the bed of the pickup and laid him down among the beer cans in a greasy cardboard box full of old spark plugs. Then Slick Jonas was taken with a moment of Christian charity. He took off his flannel shirt and tied it around the head of his comatose pal for a bandage. He rode shirtless to the hospital at 80, Johnny's wounded form flopping around in the back of the truck like a landed fish. All the way there, Slick tried to come up with some believable story. He didn't know what to say to keep himself out of trouble, but he sure had to think of something. He was plotting this as the truck passed a lone figure on the side of the highway. Buddy James blinked into the headlights on his way to anywhere, somewhere, nowhere. "My beautiful mailbox" were the last words Marlene Kroll ever spoke. God chose the hour of 1:47 on that morning for her to release her grasp on the life they had known together. Herman felt her hand go cold, and he knew. He saw the young girl who captured his heart decades ago reappear for a moment, then, as the last wisp from a dying candle, evaporate to nothingness. Only a cold shell remained behind. He held her tight, and tears of pain he had never felt in all his years ran quietly down his lined cheeks. He placed his dry farmer's lips on her cold winter brow and kissed her softly. Deep in his hurt flickered the faintest hope his kiss would keep at bay the evil now stealing his happiness. Maybe somehow all would be reversed by the power of his love. But it was not to be. She was gone, and he was truly alone, holding the icy hand of that whom she was no more. Herman wept from the core of his broken old soul. 20 minutes later, the nurses came in to discover Marlene's body. One gently led Herman out of the room as the other covered her face with the green sheet. Doctors Herman had never seen rushed past him into the room, but he didn't care. It was too late now, all done and all over. He went to the lobby in search of the chapel he remembered passing the last time they brought her here, the time the doctors assured him they would take care of her, that she would be all right. He wanted to pray to his God, to pray for gentle passage, for the spirit of his beloved, and pray for himself, for strength to get through this and not go back to his farm alone now and blow his old brains out. As he passed the desk on the first floor, a man was brought in unconscious on a stretcher, his head covered with blood, and an ambulance splint on his arm. A shirtless young man was telling the doctor that he had found the fellow in an alley, but he couldn't remember where. Herman felt real sympathy for the boy on the stretcher. He thought what a shame it was that this could happen. Probably a hard-working fellow, with decent parents, a girlfriend perhaps, not unlike himself in the old days. A good young man, with the rest of his life ahead of him, and something like this had to happen. It was a shame. He resolved to say a prayer for this young fellow as well. It put things in perspective for him. Marlene's suffering was over. Thank God for that. And Herman did thank God. He found the chapel and sat in the first pew praying, thanking his Lord for the blessings he had received in the years spent in joy and abundance. He thanked his God for the children that they'd raised and the dear family times so precious. He prayed for her soul and thanked the Lord her suffering was at an end. Finally, he asked for the strength to continue alone. He knew he had to, but it seemed now so pointless. When Herman drove around the curve on Highway 41, the sun just crested the hills, spreading dawn across the fields, lighting the creeks and hollows, glistening along the treetops. It had always been his favorite time of day, the time of the new beginning, fresh and clean. He was tired. He could use some coffee. There was so much work to be done. Of course, he had to call the kids the first thing. What would he say to them? How would he couch the bad news, soften this blow? They were grown with their own families, but still he thought of them as his children. He would just tell them And then he saw it. The mailbox stood defeated in the revealing rays of the fresh morning sun. The steel post was cocked at a bizarre angle. Something had hit it with such severe force that the church house had lost one whole side and part of the roof. He stopped beside it and got out. Pieces of the mailbox lay on the ground, but also pieces of a baseball bat, its grip wrapped with worn electrical tape. It was snapped in two and split down the middle, but there was no other sign of what had happened. One thing for certain, though, the mailbox had done its job. The booby trap had worked. Whatever kids were responsible for this damage probably had learned their lesson. They wouldn't be back. But it was the hate that got to him, that infected the morning. He smelled it all around the scene. He could see the broken remnants of hate. The neighbor's smashed mailbox a quarter-mile up the road. Silent evidence in the morning sun of rage from the dark night. Bitterness seeped in on him, filling him with a loathing, a disgust at the senselessness of it all. His lips tightened into a thin line, and he drove on to the house to make the calls. Johnny Malcolm had a severely broken right arm and multiple fracture of the cranium and facial bones. He had experienced trauma to the skull which amounted to a high-level concussion. He was in the hospital for 2 days, and then released after he was found in the room of a female patient who was sleeping, his hands under her covers groping around. Johnny never had been too smart, and the blow to his head did not improve his intelligence one whit. Most men would have gleaned some moral from the experience of the mailbox, a nugget of wisdom hidden deep in the event. But for Johnny Malcolm there was only one message that rang from the bells inside his shattered head, and it clanged continuously over and over. Revenge. It was a lovely funeral on a Sunday morning. Easily half the town attended. The ladies from the Methodist church cooked for the reception afterwards at the farm. Everyone turned out, and everyone ate well. Fried chicken, pot roast, pork chops, sausages, potato salad, yams, potatoes au gratin, sweet potatoes, German potato salad, scallop potatoes, and mashed. There were 7 salads, glorious desserts, and plenty of iced tea and coffee. And of course, ambrosia. Sweet, fluffy, satisfying. Everybody enjoyed themselves, and Marlene would have heartily approved. Her children were there, both daughters and both sons, their children and some of their in-laws. Herman was quiet throughout, not depressed really, but distant within himself, and lessened. He was affable when approached, but not as they had known him all his life. Part of him was missing, the finest part. He warmed visibly when the grandchildren came around, but aside from that, rather kept to himself. He even wandered out to the barn at one point and was found puttering around with some old pieces of wood as if he was planning to build something on the spot. His older daughter said he should come and stay with them for a while, but he said no, there was too much work around the farm. So she left him alone and went to talk to her brothers and sister about what they should do. The main topic of discussion among the men was this rash of vandalism that had destroyed 99 mailboxes. The police had no evidence, and now it seemed their suspicions of the local high school boys were unprovable. Where they would strike next was anybody's guess. Several of the men vowed what they would do if they ever got their hands on the boys, but beyond violent speculation nothing was offered in the way of a solution. Herman just kept quiet about it all, listened, but he seemed to have no need to talk about it. Discussion appeared to be beyond his interest. There was determination in his silence, which the others chalked up to grief. His younger daughter, Amanda, insisted he come to Ohio and stay with her family for a while. She seemed sent on a mission. She earnestly implored him, but he was adamant. He appreciated her offer, and he'd like to come for a visit sometime, but he had things to do here, and Mother wouldn't want him to leave just because she was gone. His job wasn't over yet. He would get along, they needn't worry, but he wasn't leaving the farm. There was still work to be done, things to look after, responsibilities to fulfill. Later, after the guests had gone, he managed to stop his children from fussing and worrying over him, and sent them all away as well. He watched the tail lights fade toward the highway, and he sat on the porch in the old wooden glider they had shared so many nights, talking, planning, their arms around each other. He rocked quietly and listened to the crickets call in the sleeping fields and hills. He wondered what he would do now, what it would be like to be half of something that once was whole, and to be alone. He wondered. After a time, he went into the house. He returned with his Winchester .30-30 and sat back in the glider with the barrel under his chin. He rocked slowly back and forth, staring out across his farm into the darkness and listening. When the sun rose and rolled back the blue-gray mists, he was still sitting, silent and alone.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of The Eclectic Reader. Please go on to the next numbered episode to continue. Also, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. If you'd like to help support the project, you can donate under Madison Mason at Patreon. And please, check out our website, kltkrdr.com, for more information.
Hi, this is Madison Mason. I want to personally thank you for listening to The Eclectic Reader and invite you to share your experience, your thoughts, and your suggestions. We have many great books lined up for the future, but if you have requests for anything that is in the public domain, please email us at kltkrdr@gmail.com.
KLTK at gmail.com.